Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Still coming at you from Hawaii, enjoying my beach vacation. Happy to be bringing you along. We spent a little time yesterday talking about incorporating vacation rental strategies into your overall strategies. Maybe not necessarily being something you're dedicated to, but maybe something that serves as a bridge towards other goals. One topic we didn't really get into yesterday, though, is what are the actual differences in my personal business between a vacation rental and a long-term rental. We talked about some of the benefits. I want to talk a little bit more about and then we're going to focus on the vacation side of it, primarily because that's really where all the action is in terms of the differences between the two. So let's jump right in. Now, number one, the advantage of the vacation rental is the payoff. I find I get, if I were to charge what the going rate is for a rental in this area in Hawaii, I would be earning per month less than half, depending on how much of the month is rented. If we keep in mind vacancy rates and all that kind of wonderful stuff, it's making me about double what I would make if I rented as a long-term rental. So that's a good thing, right? I mean, that's great for cash flow. That's just a good thing. That means you're getting more money per month out of the property. But that isn't without a burden. We talked a lot about what some of those burdens are yesterday. Let's just go ahead and jump in and get into some of the nitty-gritty details of what it takes beyond just some of the self-management that I talked about yesterday. Now, to recap what I discussed yesterday, in my opinion, unless you can get extremely lucky, you are going to need to own the vast majority of making your vacation property work in terms of making you money. We talked about the reason why built into the system practically as it relates to vacation rentals, you're at a disadvantage if you list your property with a property manager. If you could find a property manager who A, doesn't already own competing properties in the same area, and B, doesn't manage competing properties that rent for more than yours does, right? Because remember, those folks are motivated by how much they make, and they make a percentage of whatever the places rent for. So their primary goal is going to be get rented the most expensive properties, and above that, it's going to be to rent the properties that they themselves hold. Okay, so we know that. Now, that conflict of interest does not exist typically. It does to some extent, but not as aggressively if you're doing a long-term rental. I still am a strong believer that if you, as a property owner, as a landlord, want to rent a property for long term, you need to be dramatically involved in the finding a renter process. I don't trust property managers to do background checks. I do the property. I do my own. I get proper background checks done. There's plenty of online resources. We can actually do a whole other show on those. There's 3 or 4 different services out there. They're just amazing, and many of them won't cost you a dime. There are some out there where the application fee, quote unquote, is paid by the person who wants to rent your home, and that's how they make their money. They don't make their money off of you paying them anything. They make money off of folks who are trying to get into your home, paying them a fee, and then that gives you information on background and all that other kind of wonderful stuff. And we can talk about that at some other point. But what I wanted to get into is the day-to-day of being a vacation property manager or owner versus that long-term rental. So the long-term rental, what are the big deals there? We already kind of glossed over it real quickly yesterday from the long-term rental side, and really all they are is collecting your check every month, which is the most regular thing. When I've had long-term rental properties in the past, when someone has given me notice that they're going to leave, I've had to prepare for finding folks and all that other kind of wonderful stuff. But that happens when they want to move, right? That's once every few years. The typical month-to-month stuff on a regular basis was really just collecting the rents and occasionally having to get something fixed, which back in the day when I don't have any long-term rental properties that I own any longer, but when I did, I actually had a property management firm take care of that stuff. So I actually never got any calls. So very easy. However, if you want to do the vacation rental marketplace, it's a whole different ball of wax. You need to be involved in the process of finding. The difference is when you market your home as a long-term rental, you're doing that once every few years, right? You post it to Zillow, you post it wherever the hottest places are to post rental properties. When you find a renter, you're done. Well, and that's it, right? Once they've moved in, you're no longer worrying about whether it's clean and whether the drapes look good or whether the refrigerator's doing its thing or any of these other types of problems. But when you're doing a vacation rental, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 52 weeks a year, 365 days a year, you are marketing that property to an audience and wanting to entice them to select your property over someone else's every time that they book a vacation or whatever they're booking for, right? So there's an added burden right there. You need to make sure you've got great photos of your property. You need to make sure that you are offering a competitive offering to other folks who are shopping. I'm on VRBO probably every week, just kind of checking things out. Now, a great thing about VRBO is they do have a great dashboard that'll tell you who looked at your property and then they decide to rent to someone else or to rent from someone else. Then you can do a side-by-side comparison between your property and their property and clue yourself into things that you might be missing that you need to be aware of. So that's and remember, I live 3,000 miles away from where my property is. So this is a long distance thing, but I'm also accepting bookings. I am fielding questions. I am making sure that folks are paying their initial deposit and their final amount before they are allowed into the property. And then the rest of the on-site stuff is handled by a property manager. And that's really all they do. All they do is hand out the key. They give everyone the tour, and then when they're ready to leave, they collect the key and make sure that it's ready for the next guest. Okay. And from the standpoint of me, my actual scenario, every month I have to do my Hawaii taxes for the unit. I have to write a check to my property manager. I have to keep him updated on who the scheduled guests are. Unfortunately, my property manager is not tech savvy, so I can't simply send him a link to the calendar. My cleanup crew seems to have no problem figuring out that technology, but I'll be damned if I can find this property manager can figure that stuff out. So I have to manually give him updates on what's going on with reservations. So from a sitting at home at my desk, I check in on VRBO as soon as I'm prompted. I got an email telling me someone's interested in renting. I have it set up so it's as easy as possible to rent. People can use a credit card. People can use a lot of different ways to pay. And of course, VRBO takes a piece of the pie, but that's A-okay for the service that they offer. I'm fine with that. And it facilitates things happening relatively easily. Then there are folks who have questions before they want to actually book, and I have to field those. And it's vitally important to field those questions as quickly as possible. Typically, the faster you respond, the more likely those people are to end up renting your property. So those are all the realities. The next thing is you have to deal with feedback from tenants, from vacationers. And you'll get a variety of things. You'll get one-offs that are odd, that maybe don't need your attention quite as much as other things. And then you'll get things that are a regular theme that make you realize, yeah, you know what, I need to take care of this. Maybe you can trust the folks you have doing business with you in terms of your cleanup crew or your property manager to go and take a look at those things. I have found that to be less than a reliable way to address issues, unless that's an easily identifiable issue, right? Like if a light is out, something is broken, as happened in October of last year, the water heater blows up. You know, those are all things that clearly are not going to be easy to go unnoticed. So at least from that standpoint, you can get those things taken care of. As a vacation property owner, though, landlord, you really need to step up. So it has been a little while since I've been to the unit. And my feeling is in order to do it well, you as a owner need to visit the property twice a year. I would say optimally. I have not done that. When I first acquired the property, I think I came once the first year, once the second year, maybe once the third year. I'm not even sure how many years it's been at this point, but I know I haven't been here in 2 years almost to the day, which has turned out to be not awesome. So in coming back, you need to be prepared not just to look at or maybe the better way to say it is, and in my case, I have to come and I have to stay, right? Because I have to get on a plane, I have to fly here, I have to run a car. You need to come ready to do things. And you should come with a list. The list should include any complaints that you've gotten from your vacationers and see if you can address them. So a big one I was getting, just to give you a real world example, I had purchased sight unseen through Amazon a new TV for the unit. The old TV was an old tube TV. I did this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and figured ballparked what the size was and thought, oh great, it's got a DVD player built into it. That'll make that problem less complicated. Purchased it, had it sent to my property manager, had him install it, which in and of itself was way more complicated than it should have been, and everyone hated it. It was universally despised. So I came and saw that, I guess I came to the unit a couple of months after the new TV had been installed, and sure enough, they were absolutely right. The sound was crappy, it was too small, a bad call. So this time around, I replaced the TV. There was no reason not to. TVs in the 32-inch range, which is about the right size for this room, ridiculously cheap. You can get a really nice Samsung, and so I went from having a really small DVD built-in setup without any other bells and whistles to having a smart TV where my guests can do Netflix, YouTube, Hulu, Prime Video, all that other, tons and tons of other stuff if they want. Plus, they can do DVDs. I bought an external DVD player, another one of those things that's ridiculously cheap these days. I think it was $30 for a brand spanking new Sony external DVD player. So that's taken care of, and I'm anticipating that folks will appreciate that in future guests, and I'll absolutely punch those extra things in the documentation or in the online presentation of my property. But the other thing you have to come ready to do is evaluate the property from one end to the other to figure out all the things you need to do to it in order to make it nice. Now, another thing folks had mentioned was that the refrigerator was looking a little bit shoddy. This is the tropics. Things rust here, and they rust very heavily. So there's another thing that's a side point, I think, to bring up. Understand how the environment affects your property wherever it is. If you're in a nice, dry, if you're in a Phoenix, you know what? Rust probably isn't going to be a thing, right? It's a heat, but it's a dry heat. That's what everybody tells me. So you're probably not going to have to worry about your refrigerator getting little rust spots on it. Well, you're going to get rust spots on everything. The last time I was here, I replaced every light switch, every plug, everything, every faceplate for every one of those things with new stuff. And here I am 2 years later, and I had to replace two of the ones I originally did because they were already rusting. And of course, in my particular setup, I have two gigantic sets of windows with screens on them. And of course, the switches and the plugs closest to those were the ones that were having the biggest problem. So that's just it from a safety standpoint. And remember, this isn't a very large place. So the other thing I came in and noticed was, for whatever reason, I had bought brand new curtains about 1.5 years ago, I guess. And over the years, the little rollers had fallen off and had accumulated literally in the corner behind the TV. No one had ever looked at them. No one had ever done anything, despite the fact that drapes were drooping. None of the people who I have in here all the time, not my cleanup crew, not my property manager. Now remember, before I came out for this visit, I sent an email to both of those folks and said, please, the next time you're in the unit, look around and give me a list of things that need attention. The only thing anybody told me was rust spots on the refrigerator. That was it. Since getting here, I discover, some furniture that needed to be replaced or repaired, the TV situation, the drapes not hanging correctly, a light fixture that simply was not working at all things that clearly should have been noticed by folks here. So what's the point I'm trying to make? Unless you get extremely lucky, you cannot delegate this stuff to a third party and expect your property to continue to draw people who are going to come and want to rent in it and continue to keep, because remember, the ratings apply here. The other thing I didn't mention is that when someone visits your property and stays in it, they get an opportunity to rate it with X amount of stars. And if you don't get high ratings on a regular basis, eventually that's going to negatively affect your ability to get rented. When people see that there's a $2 difference between renting your place and someone else's place, but someone else has a higher star rating, odds are they're going to win in that scenario. So managing those reviews is important, responding to reviews, letting folks know that you appreciate the feedback, and you need to be political. Don't be snarky, even if someone deserves it. I've had a couple of guests who broke the rules. No one who's done anything horrible. I've never had someone do actual damage to the unit per se. But I did have one lady who, I guess, moved furniture all over the place, had 2 to 3 times as many people as she was permitted to have in the unit. Apparently they were also smoking, and so there's a lot of different things. I guess they didn't think that I had people who actually looked at the place when I have folks staying here. I actually know the neighbors on all sides of me, so that makes it a little bit easier. And of course, even though that person is a pinhead, well, what do you do about that, right? If that person gives you a 0-star rating or a 1-star rating, that can very negatively affect it. So even in those extreme scenarios, you need to handle those as professionally and as customer oriented as you possibly can. So the reason I mentioned that one is that client was one of the few people I actually gave a rating to. You're allowed to give them ratings too, and I gave her a 1-star rating, and this very much pissed her off. And then I came back and basically explained she was the only person who I'd ever gotten feedback on from both my cleanup crew and my property manager, relating to just how the state that they left the place in and the fact that they were clearly doing things that were against the rules. So that situation resolved itself, and I guess the timing worked, because by the time I did a rating for her, the window for her to do a rating had closed or something, so I don't know. So she was never actually able to deliver a rating for the place. But anyway, the point is you need to always have your political hat on when you're dealing with as a vacation rental with those venues that you're renting the property through. Now, the other thing, I have spent a ton of time here going through everything, making sure everything is up to snuff. Spent 2 days sanding a refrigerator, spent another 2 days putting several coats of specific refrigerator epoxy paint on the thing. And I gotta say, I know this isn't an opportunity theoretically for me to just toot my own horn. This refrigerator looks brand spanking new. It's functionally always been completely fine, but it was ugly as all get out given the rustings on it. And I gotta tell you, if you're someone who's doing either vacation or long-term rentals and you're providing a refrigerator, totally worth it. I thought it would just look tacky afterwards, but it looks amazing. I'm sitting here staring at it right now, and got to admit, it's a little bit exciting to see how wonderful it looks. Other things, too, you're going to want to look for. Preventative things. If you have a water heater, this is the new thing I'm trying to make sure to do, give it its yearly maintenance where you drain it, refill it and drain it, try to get all that crap out of the tank to extend its life. The life of this most recent water heater was much shorter than it should have been. When I've done rentals in the past, I find out what date the water heater was installed, and I usually give it a 10-year lifespan. And so I'll actually put in my online calendar, 10 years from now, replace the water heater. Do things preventatively. Don't wait for things to break. So I go around, I checked all the towel racks, for instance. Is everything screwed in all the way? Is there anything that's even vaguely loose? What about leaks? Look underneath the sinks. Make sure all the pipes are looking good. One thing I want to try to iron out while I'm here is have a plumber come in and get a automatic emergency water shut-off valve installed. If you are a vacation rental person, let me suggest, or even just a regular long-term rental person, if you want to prevent huge problems, get yourself one of these little devices. They even have ones that can connect to the internet so that you can see what the water usage is on your cell phone, and you can turn the water off. You can turn the water back on if you get a call saying that's automatically turned off for whatever reason, and there isn't a problem. But just to kind of lay out what happened back in October when the water heater went out, that wasn't in place. So in order to get the water to turn off, they actually had to turn off the water downstairs, which turns it off to, I think, half of the units on this side of the building. And who knows how long the water had been running by the time that was noticed. So, of course, I'm on the 6th floor, so all the units below me were getting flooded by water. And once everything was said and done, there was approximately $15,000 worth of damage done. Most of it not in my unit. Finally just ironed that out recently with insurance and everything, but that is not something I want to have to deal with in terms of my insurance rates going up as a landlord. If there's one thing we all want to keep control of, it's our fixed costs, and I like my insurance costs to stay as fixed as humanly possible. Okay, what else? Now, of course, some of the other things that you're going to want to do on a regular basis, check all the light bulbs. And I know a lot of landlords want to not make that a thing. In other words, if you have a lamp or a light fixture that has space for 2 light bulbs, they'll just put in 1. So my suggestion is to time it so that when you go, so in theory, if you're engaging in my suggestion, you're going to go twice a year. And my suggestion is to not install or not have both light bulbs in the same fixture be the same age. In other words, they should be offset with each other. So I know that's tough, but what my goal here is so that typically these lights won't go out near each other in terms of time, so that their life expectancy is staggered. So that way, at the rate that you're showing up, you can make sure that these things are staying functional. Now, light bulbs should absolutely be something that your property manager or cleanup crew can handle. But as I'm noticing here, not a guarantee. So why not just create policies or ways that you do things that minimize the opportunity for these things to happen all at once and everything goes out. Other things. What's in the unit? What are the things that are keeping it comfortable for folks to use? I'm talking about dishes, glasses, can openers, pots, and pans. I came back to find that the pots and pans looked horrible. They had that sort of Teflon coating on them. All that stuff was all scratched up right down to the metal. So threw all those out, replaced all those. And it's not that you need to have everything. I think you can be completely minimalist in what you're putting in your vacation rental, but just make sure that what you have is fully functional. Don't leave the cracked glass. Don't leave the stuff that's in crappy shape. Make sure that you've got stuff in there that's going to work. And again, there's 2 schools of thought. There is the buy the cheapest thing you can find school of thought, and then there's the buy the mid-range stuff that's likely to last longer mindset. And I go with the second. The stuff that's crappy is going to tend to go crappy pretty quickly. So why bother doing that? It just means you have to replace it sooner. So I've got a couple of really nice pieces in here. I've got like a Cephalon pot. I've got some other things, stuff that you can just pick up at Target. You don't need to go crazy. But generally things that are going to make the stay more convenient. No little things that are going to make people just get annoyed that it's not here. Now, of course, there's going to be the region-specific things, right? So given where my unit is, it's going to make sense for me to offer things for folks to use, like snorkels, masks, fins, boogie boards, wakeboards, those types of things, beach furniture that folks can use down at the beach, since that's where we are, right? Same might apply to you if I don't have a surfboard, because there's no freaking way anyone can surf here. The surf just isn't that high. This is a place where folks who have families are likely going to want to come. We have a reef just offshore, so super calm water, great for families, so more likely to be kids. So maybe the little buckets and shovels, things for kids to play with, that kind of thing. Now, let me give you a moment of restoration and humanity, because this really dazzled me when I came in. I came in fully expecting to have the little chest. I have a chest out on the lanai that's full of all the water fun stuff. And when I left last time, I had left several pairs of fins and masks, all the usual stuff. And I'd left a couple of really cheapo boogie boards. In retrospect, I should have gotten better ones, but that's kind of how it went. The second day I was here, I go out onto the lanai and I open it up, and there is tons of fins and snorkels and masks that I never left there. And it's not stuff I put there. There are 3 really nice boogie boards there. And what else? Okay, same furniture that I provided, but the rest of it's all relatively new, less than a year old, clearly left there by my renters, by my guests. And I sit back and I think, and some of these are, I've seen these boards around. I know these goes for between $80 and $100. So great, and despite the fact you're going to occasionally bump into folks, and those are the ones that tend to grab your attention, that are super annoying or just not really patient with you for whatever reason, there are tons of people out there that are doing really nice things, and it's important to recognize those. So one thing I have implemented for that, and that's something I've been working on actually since I've been here, and when it gets to be the evening and I can't paint refrigerators anymore, communicate with your folks. Now through VRBO, I get everybody's email address, so I keep them on a mail list, and I have now offered everyone who has, since I don't know who did it, I have offered to everyone who's ever rented in the last 2 years a extra 10% off on the next time they want to visit. As long as they use the email address that I have on file for them to make the reservation. They need to make sure and point it out to me. But in addition to whatever discounts they get for the time that they pick, they'll get an additional 10% off. So I think reaching out to folks who've been visitors before is an important part of the process as well. Now, in terms of vacation rental, what are things that are on my mind as a vacation rental owner of things that I need to do that aren't small things, right? It's not, replacing outlets or oiling doorknobs, right? Which is a bizarre thing, I know, but again, tropical. It rusts everything. So every time I come, I take all the doorknobs and locks off. I take everything apart and I use lock oil. Yes, there is a thing called lock oil, and I oil everything up and I put it back together. And that works great. I've never had to replace any of these things just by doing a little preventative maintenance. But then there's the bigger things, right? And one of the big things that's a problem with this unit is the kitchen. It's functional, but it's just not very pretty, right? It's sort of got that pale light green Formica countertop thing going on. Don't like it at all. But in order for me to make the upgrade, it's probably going to cost me in the neighborhood of, using as an example, another owner of an exact same size unit as this one is. They recently had their kitchen done, and they did it for about $8,000, $9,000. I've looked at it and given different choices I would have made, rounded up to say 10 grand. So you have to come to the conclusion of, well, at what point is it worth that? How much more could I rent my place for if I went ahead and did that $10,000? However, in a vacation rental, there's also this idea that renters will tend to treat your property the way that you present your property. So if they come in and it looks like sort of a shabby place, then they're going to treat it shabbily, right? If they come in and it's got some of these higher tone touches, then I'm likely going to attract people who are going to treat it that way, right? And that's also the theory in long-term rentals, frankly, in terms of just the type of property. So what do you do there? This is a change I'd like to make. And then I would obviously have to raise my rents a certain amount. But at this point, I'm not entirely confident that raising my rents would be the way to go. So it's something that's on the list to do. It's not preventing people from renting. I have had, since I started doing this a few years back, I think I've had 1 or 2 folks in their reviews kind of complain about how dated the kitchen is. But in my description, right up front, I state, this is a very Spartan, simply functional kitchen. If you're looking for something with, the latest decor and granite countertops, you're going to want to look elsewhere and then pay the premium for that. But right now, the premium only seems to be about $5 a night. So I'm just not sure it's worth the bang for the buck to do that. The other thing for me is whenever I come, I evaluate the decor to try to figure out what needs to change, what needs to happen in general. There's a lot of things I'm not entirely satisfied with. Some of them less of a big deal. The bathroom is a little small for me. I'd love to make that bigger, but I'm dealing with a really small footprint of a unit, so that's problematic. I dislike the layout of the primary bedding area in the back. I actually never sleep there. I always sleep in the front of the unit. I don't think I've ever slept on the bed that's in this unit. I always sleep on the day bed in the front because I love the ocean. But again, all things that should be on your list. You need to be thinking critically as a customer. Remember, you don't just think of these folks as your renters, right? Think of them as your customers, because you're drawing new ones every single day who are browsing through these various outlets like VRBO and HomeAway to find their next rental property. So it's a heavier burden, I have to admit, it absolutely is. But this property would not be positive cash flow without me doing it as a vacation rental. It still affords me plenty of time to rent it myself or to use it myself and to let friends use it on occasion. So it's really a win-win. So I get the advantages of owning it in terms of using it whenever I want, as long as I think far enough ahead. So what are the results? Okay, so the limitations. I've kind of laid out the state of my place, and you can find my place. I mean, if you want to go look on VRBO, maybe I'll put a link to the page for this unit in VRBO, and you can take a look at it. Some things I've done, I tiled the floor. It used to be wall-to-wall carpeting, which is absolutely moronic in the tropics, but replaced it with tile. If I had it to do over again, I probably would have gone with black grout instead of the sand-colored grout, because I just don't It looks more like it's dirty grout rather than it's sand-colored grout, so I'm not entirely pleased with that. What else have I done? Obviously, the new TV. I've replaced the water heater. There have been a lot of little maintenance things that I've done, but really, it's really just a kind of, the big draw is the fact that it's a corner unit. You get the great views. You're right here on the ocean, and you're higher, so you're able to get sort of the higher elevation views. Now, how is that done for me? Typically, I am rented about 3 months in advance. So if I don't decide, if I suddenly decided today that I wanted to be here in April, I might have a hard time doing that. I'm typically, as I mentioned, rented 80 to 85% of the time. Every once in a while, I get a super long rental. I've got one coming up, I think, that's a month long. And then I have another person who just rented for this time next year. And that'll happen. You'll get folks who will make reservations a year ahead of time, who's going to be in here for 28 days. So typically, doing well. So and I am competitively rented. My rate, I think I have it currently set at $132 a night. And if you rent for 7 days or more, you get a 10% discount. All things designed to make you more desirable than the next property they might look at. And that has worked out pretty well for me. You can apply all of these same ideas to any property anywhere. Just make sure that these thoughts are wrapped around customers who are likely to be attracted to a property in your area, that would be attracted to whatever it has to offer, whether it's snow and skiing, or it's hiking or biking or wine country or whatever. Just make sure you're really creating something that's a product, because remember, that's one big difference. You're always having to make a product out of your property that people want to buy for certain periods of time. So keep all that in mind, and I think you can make it a great success. I hope this helps you out. It may not be what you want to hear. A lot of folks I know who want to get into real estate think of this as a hands-off thing. You buy it, delegate it to a manager, and then move on. Well, if you wanted to do that here in Hawaii, you'd probably be spending 35% of whatever you make. And I think you would make less anyway, because I think you'd have fewer guests. I think the odds are that a property manager would put someone, unless you're going to go ahead and get a unit that's going to be one of their top grossing units, odds are that you're going to be the last on the list to get filled. So keep that all in mind. I think to make it a success, you need to be fully vested. And again, as we talked about yesterday, this can be an awesome strategy for you to get that property. Now, and I don't know we're not talking about a specific deal here. I still think that you need to try to buy properties so that it makes sense in a positive cash flow way for long-term rentals. That needs to be your goal. But if for whatever reason, if the way you read the economy in your area is going, it makes sense for you to make a purchase where you can bridge the gap between vacation property and long-term rental by doing this, great. These are the realistic things you need to keep in mind. And you need to push it. You need to get out there and get things going. Now, I will say, when I started out, this was my first vacation property. Didn't really know what I was doing. Started off trying it by rolling my own, by creating my own website, creating a way for you to pay on my website. I didn't want to have to pay someone else to manage all this stuff, or to give me the service that I wanted. Don't do that. Trust me, unless you want to own a ridiculous amount of online marketing to get eyeballs on your website, it's just not going to happen. You can go to robertsrentals.us if you want to see my unit. That was the site I originally created that had everything separate. It had its own way to pay. It was like a Shopify site, right? It was a way for me to keep money out of the hands of middlemen. Total failure. So once I went over to VRBO and started having them do their thing, it was literally, I had renters within 24 hours. So in terms of the value they bring to the equation, totally worth I think I pay 300 something. I don't even know what it is. 300 something a year, I think, is a subscription fee, and then you pay a transaction fee when folks pay using a credit card. Totally worth it. So that's my 2 cents as someone who's actively gone through this and tried both the roll your own option and the go with an established outlet option. All right, folks, once again, from the beautiful state of Hawaii, as I look out on the Pacific Ocean, I hope you are having a great day. Thanks again for taking time out to listen to what I have to say on these subjects. As always, the goal is to leave you with more knowledge than you spent in time. Hope we did it. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to y'all next time.